Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where every day I try to focus more on the solution rather than the problem and learn how technology can make a real difference to our lives, our work, and even our world. And it has been a turbulent year, to say the least, and we are all surrounded by uncertainty wherever we are in the world. But as an eternal optimist, I recently read a book by Jerry Wind and Nitin Rakesh called Transformation in Times of Crisis. And the theme of the book is that every crisis, while deeply unsettling, it contains the seeds of opportunity. And the book was written not just to sit on a bookshelf gathering dust, but to actually help the reader transform any crisis into opportunities by applying 8 simple principles and an analytical framework that will help improve their own unique situation. And for better or worse, COVID-19 has indeed disrupted the way industries do business. But how does it affect you? And how can you transform? Well, hopefully we're going to learn a little bit more today. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to a extremely snowy east coast of the US, where the authors are waiting to speak with us today. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
My name is Nitin Rakesh. I'm the CEO at Mphasis, and Jerry and I just co-authored a book called Transformation in Times of Crisis. I'm a passionate technology and business evangelist, and really enjoy, talking about transformation.
Hi, I'm Jerry Wayne. I'm a Lauder Professor Emeritus at the Wharton School. I was there for 50 years and am now enjoying emeritus status, writing books, consulting, working on boards of many nonprofits, and having fun.
Thanks so much to both of you for coming on the podcast today. And I appreciate this is a big question, but for business leaders listening, how can they transform their enterprise to actually prevent disruption? And Nitin, I'll throw that one over to you first.
Thanks, Neil. I think, again, it's interesting. There is a little bit of a backstory about the book, and the backstory goes as follows. We started collaborating, the idea was born on a napkin back in 2017, 2018. And the topic that we were thinking about at that point was what we call architecture of disruption, which is how do you architect your own disruption as a business so you don't leave that disruption to outside forces, which means if you don't change, the market will force you to change, and in the end, you might end up getting disrupted. So I think the 8 principles that we've talked about in the book really are, in a way, a framework that you can apply to architect your own disruption and transform to a next-gen business. What the crisis did really was accelerate many of the underlying trends that were already existing. Think about the disruption that was underway in the business world, over the last few years. Amazon in retail, Netflix in media, PayPal in payments, and the list goes on. And the reason why we were seeing that level of disruption is because consumers were driving that disruption based on the expectations that had fundamentally changed in how they wanted to be serviced, how they wanted to be engaged. The use of digital technology became a tool for disruption, but really it was the consumer driving that disruption. So I think this really is a set of principles and a framework that we deployed that you can use under any crisis, COVID or not.
And Jerry, from your point of view, what does the transformation in times of crisis mean to you?
Well, I think the key point to remember is what Nitin just said, that the trends actually existed, but the crisis accelerates them and brought them to a point that requires companies to rethink what they do. We cannot go back to the pre-crisis situation when universities successfully transformed to e-learning, when telemedicine is out there, when e-commerce dominates. To go back after the crisis and just assume that nothing happened and just we're going back to the pre-crisis condition is absolutely crazy. So management have to realize that things have changed. We're facing a new reality. And because of the new reality, the first thing we have to do is we have to challenge everything we've done before. We have to challenge our old mental models, business model, revenue models, offering, and the like. And the book, hopefully, which we start with, one of the first chapters is on the need to challenge one's mental model, really focuses on providing management the motivation, incentive, inspiration to rethink what they're doing, learn from the various examples we bring in the book, and use some of the tools and frameworks we are offering that will allow them to succeed and capture really the opportunities the crisis provides.
And I'm curious, is there another story of what brought you both together and inspired you to write this book? Nitin, how did you get involved?
Yeah, I think as I was mentioning earlier, Neil, we were actually doing a small workshop at Wharton a couple of years ago, and Jerry very kindly agreed to moderate that with a few of our business execs and clients in the US. And I think the topical discussion was around disruption and disruption coming out of the fintech world, for example, or the startup community, or the the tech-led disruption. And we evolved this construct that we now call front-to-back transformation, which is really about, if you're an existing legacy business, how do you really embrace all the new developments that are coming out of the technology world, and how do you really use them to power your own change and your own transformation? So in a way, this idea was born on a napkin, and Jerry and I kind of took that concept and we developed it. Jerry challenged me to think about writing a book. My first response was, heck no, I've never written a book. And Jerry said, I got you covered. I've written many. So I think that's how the partnership was born. And I'm so delighted in hindsight that Jerry convinced me to do it, because it's been an absolutely rewarding experience, not just for me personally, but I think for anybody who's now been involved in learning from these principles.
And Jerry, have you got anything to add to that? What brought the two of you together and the inspiration behind the book?
Well, perhaps destiny, chemistry, luck, any one of these. I think it's been really terrific experience. Always throughout my life, most of the concepts, tools I developed were actually inspired by business problems and working with executives. Nitin was extremely open-minded. We had a lot of similar ideas and believed in the same thing. So it was really like a match made in heaven. It really worked. And the last few years have been absolutely delight working together.
Fantastic. And you did mention in the opener to the podcast that the book talks about the 8 principles to create opportunities and value in a post-pandemic world. So can you offer a brief overview of those principles?
Yeah, I think I'll cover some of those. I think Jerry talked about the foundational principle, which is what we are calling challenge your mental models. And I think which is all about shifting the way you think about a problem and a crisis. Because if you're only looking to stay in the comfort zone, I think it's a little bit about having a growth mindset, looking to lean forward. So that's the foundational principle. And then we talk a little bit about things like, reimagining your approach to customers and stakeholders. This is where you talk, the opportunity to use modern technology. Think about the world that has gone digital only. I think if you think about the shift from an omni-channel mindset to a digital native or a digital first mindset, you start reimagining the way you engage with customers, your customer journeys, how you use data to derive insights and create these experiences that can be personalization. And that's really the next principle, which is how do you design for personalization at scale? I think there is tremendous amount of value and data available about every transaction, every consumer. Of course, while respecting the issues around privacy, that data can be extremely insightful for enterprises in how to improve customer service, how to improve quality of products. And eventually, how do you create personalization where each consumer is made to feel like, the enterprise is servicing him or her as a unique consumer? I think that's something that a lot of our digital companies have done really well. For example, Netflix or Amazon Prime, extremely high, highly developed personalization engines at scale. Then we talk a little bit about open talent, open innovation. How do you ensure that you're not just looking at, within the company, within the enterprise, but embrace, the concept of outside talent and outside innovation. I think about using startups in your strategy. Think about co-innovation. Think about the Uberization of the workforce and the talent. And then I think from there on, we talk about the need for, experimentation across multiple horizons. You not only have to think about today, but you also start seeding ideas that give you the ability to invest for the future. And finally, how do you create an organization design and a network orchestration mindset where you're actually harnessing the power of the ecosystem more than just trying to do everything yourself. I think that's a very quick, I would say, kind of a 2-minute snapshot of all the principles. The beauty is they all have to come together for this to work. In itself, each of them are important, necessary, but not sufficient, conditions. All of these principles kind of go hand in hand because they blend into each other and kind of create that network effect in itself.
And Jerry, was it difficult bringing those principles together to make them meaningful?
No, actually, it was relatively easy. We both agreed as we kind of worked on the book on what are those principles. And you note that many of them are kind of combined. There are more than a single item in many of them. For example, when Nitin was talking about personalization and scale, we combined it in the same chapter with the whole need for speeding up the digital transformation of companies. So a lot of them are combined ideas, but are pretty fundamental. And we bring a lot of examples. But I think one of the things that the book does well is we identified a lot of examples that brings them to life so people can appreciate what do these principles kind of mean and hopefully get some inspiration from there. And then once we identify the principles, the question is, so what do you do with them? So we developed some tools to help people apply some of the principles and provided a framework that will allow anyone to basically start implementing, buying into them, challenging them, and ideally experiment with them. And then how do you design your whole organization, the organizational architecture, the networks that you're orchestrating to allow you to implement this effectively?
And that's what I think so great about the book, because it's not just something that a business leader or decision maker would read and then put on the shelf. It's actually that encouraging to apply those principles and make a real difference. I appreciate this is a big question. You don't want to reveal too much in the book, but for any business leader that's listening, how can they follow these principles and transform their enterprise to prevent disruption?
Yeah, I think Jerry talked about the tools and the framework. So what we've done is at the end of every chapter there are simple guidelines that kind of give you the ability to quote unquote test how you do against those principles in your existing thought process or the business. And then the last chapter really is a whole quote unquote toolkit that gives you the ability to actually track your progress, baseline your current situation, and then track your progress as you start implementing some of those principles. So I think there's a set of 10 tools and a framework that you can use to apply those tools into your org design as well. So I think again, without being too preachy, we've tried to kind of create a set of principles, exemplify each one of them, with ample examples in almost every chapter, and then kind of bring it all together in a recommended toolkit type of an approach, which can be very highly customized and adapted to any industry or any business environment.
And Jerry, was that really important to you that book would be brought to life by giving people that toolkit that could go away and apply some of those principles in real world scenarios? Absolutely.
Our whole objective with the book was to try to encourage management to change, to capitalize on the opportunities the current crisis offers. There's no sense writing a book and having it on the shelf.
Yeah.
So the real kind of encouraging email I got the other day was a picture of one of the people who bought a book who sent me with tons of kind of yellow notes throughout, and he showed me how he's using the book. And I told him that's really the purpose of writing the book. But recognize the fact that the audience is heterogeneous, that there are different companies at different stage of development, different level of complexity, different level of applying some of the principles. I think what we're offering is really two approaches. One is, if you really buy into the whole concept of the book, you read it carefully, and you really want to do a fresh start, yeah, great. Go to the framework. We'll start with idealized design. We'll tell you how to do it. We'll give you the tool. You can go through all the 8 principles and develop a wonderful new strategy for the firm. But if you feel that that's too much and you don't want to do it, or if you're not as enlightened CEO as Nitin is, and you've got the CEO is not interested in this, but the head of the business units or a brand manager or someone else is interested in applying some of the ideas, just select any of the ideas, any of the 8 principles, and start experimenting with this. There's no better way of getting into the kind of the thick of things and realizing the opportunities we have today than experimenting. So identify any one of them, whether in the consumer area or on open innovation or on any aspect we're covering in the book. Design experiment around this, run it, see how it works. If it works, scale it big. If it doesn't work, kill it, go to experiment with something else. So we're really encouraging, you can do it, either the whole thing, the framework is there for you and the tools there, or be selective and select whatever fit your specific situation. And we offer you a simple tool there to try to help you decide on each one of the 8 principles. How far along are you on this principle? So do you really have to start right now? Is it emergency? You really have to do something about this? Or you're okay on this and then move to some of the other principles?
I love that. And the passion for the subject really comes through from both of you there. And I'm curious, from all those hours you spent together, because let's be honest, creating a book, it takes so many hours pouring away and getting those ideas out of your heads, both of you. So from when you started crafting the book, what was the key takeaway that you wanted readers of the book to walk away with? And I'll throw that one to you first.
I think, Neil, as we talked about it, right, we were obviously quite passionate about, in a way, helping enterprises make this, digital leap, because, we could see that disruption was rampant all around us. And, it just felt like something had to be done about creating, some form of a tool book or a set of principles that could be followed. So I think the objective was fairly simple. We had a point of view. We thought we had, quote unquote, cracked the puzzle of how we can address the issue of disruption and how we can enable enterprises with a framework. But at the same time, we obviously don't pretend to be experts in every industry. So we had to really, really respect the fact that we'll have to create a framework that can be adapted. Isn't really very prescriptive, but a lot recommendative in nature. And I think that's the reason why we took. I think that the hardest part about getting the book started really was creating those 8 principles that are so foundational to the whole transformation frameworks. And I think then, of course, diving deeper into each of those principles with examples was a lot of fun, because the world is full of inspirational transformative companies, all the way from the new startup companies to, of course, we talked about companies like Kroger's in there. We actually, just before the book went to publishing, we included a story about the brave nature of the decision that the Pfizer CEO made in actually committing to the production of the vaccine, even without knowing whether the vaccine was going to be approved or effective. And of course, in hindsight, we know that the Pfizer vaccine was the first one to be approved and with 95% efficacy. So I think we kind of tried to kind of cover the entire arc of industries, principles, and inspirational stories to go along with it. But I think it was hard work to kind of come up with those 8 principles and the structure, and then a lot of fun to dive deep into each of those.
And Jerry, for anyone listening that's thinking of picking up the book, what message would you say to them that you'd want them to walk away with?
Let me propose 3 takeaways. 1, to realize that there is no return to the pre-crisis conditions. We face a new reality, and everyone has to try to identify what are the opportunities and try to grab them. The second is adopt the idea of adaptive experimentation. Experimentation is really key in today's environment. You can no longer go with the old approach for planning, long-term planning and annual planning and all these planning in this uncertain environment. What you really want to have is you want to have a long-term objective and vision you try to accomplish, ideally a visionary one. Nitin mentioned Kroger. We love their current vision, which is zero hunger, zero waste. That's the type of inspirational vision that drives a company. They have a target date. They're saying by 2025. But whoever you're listening, if you're the CEO, come up with a compelling vision that has an impact both on your company and all the stakeholders, including society. Think about the zero hunger, zero waste, how inspirational it is. And then design experiments, continuous experimentation with whatever you're doing to try to see what will get you there as fast as possible, as effective as possible. And the third thing is have the courage to do it. And I think the example that Nitin gave in terms of the Pfizer CEO is a great example. Have the courage to implement, because unfortunately, too many CEOs that we know don't have the courage and are just relying on the status quo. Well, things will change. We have time. No, we don't. Kind of speed is of essence today. We have to act. Companies have to have the feel of urgency in what they're doing, because we're trying really to capitalize on the crisis and turn things around and become the disruptor of an industry. We have to act now, and we have to have the courage to do it.
Love that, because there was so much uncertainty last year. And now, like you say, most businesses are looking to completely bounce back and look at different ways of working and actually thriving and surviving in a post-pandemic world. So I've got to ask, we've got the 8 principles here. We've got a way forward. What is it that makes you hopeful and possibly even excited about the road ahead? And I'll throw that to you first.
Yeah, I think I'm an optimist at heart. I think through every crisis are born new leaders, whether in business or personal. We've seen some of that play out in the recent past. You see the leadership provided by leaders worldwide, and you can start to see the impact that they've made to the crisis. But more importantly, I think this has been a huge accelerant of trends of sorts, and industries far as wide from travel all the way to banking, insurance, retail, media. I think we've seen some massive changes happen in a very short period of time. I'll give you one example. Who would have imagined that you will see the worldwide premiere of Wonder Woman 2 on HBO Max on streaming just the same day it was launched on theaters? I think that is something that was unimaginable a year ago. And I think some of these changes are here to stay. And I'm really, really optimistic that a number of these business leaders have taken a very forward-leaning position and truly embraced the change. And not only are trying to benefit from it for the short term, but really are thinking of fundamental shifts to the way they engage with customers and the way they think about their business model. So I think it's going to be a very fascinating journey to watch over the next 12, 24 months as we revert to the new normal. But at the same time, I think I'm also very pleased that there's light at the end of the tunnel for this human tragedy as well.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you there. And Jerry, is there anything that particularly excites you about the road ahead?
I think it's the changes that we see, and the encouraging changes you see, for example, with the future of work. Work from home is not going away. Kind of companies realize that it's really working, and they are rethinking, kind of the future of work. What are the implications to how they structure work? Even what's the nature of the workspace? What are the implications to the architecture and design of workspaces and the like? At the same time, I think the area we all really should kind of look forward to is the area of the shift toward a stakeholder orientation, and realizing that you cannot just focus on the traditional maximizing long-term shareholder value, but we have to take into account the impact on all stakeholders, especially the consumer, the empowered consumers, and our employees. And at the same time, when you start looking at these two together, you start realizing you really have to rethink your entire talent strategy and how do you integrate this with open innovation and open talent out there. And we're doing all this is ideally toward improving society, toward having really a positive social impact on society. And business, unfortunately, over the years, have had too many, kind of incidents of greed, unethical behavior, and others. And I hope that these will change and people will become much more concerned about the impact of their activities and how can they create truly win-win relationship with everyone. It's a new form of leadership that requires this win-win, including win for society, and how can industry impact this. And today we're dealing, especially if you think about the after January 6th event in the US, the riots on the Capitol, we have an incredible, very unfortunate ideological divide in the US. And I really hope that the businesses will marshal their resources and positioning and activities to try to help not only promote their own products for the benefit of consumers and everyone else, but also will try to use it as a way to try to unify the country, to encourage brands to bring together members of the two divides in the US and lead to a better society for all.
Love that, and a beautiful moment to end on. And for everyone listening, Nitin, can you just remind everyone of the title of the book, where they can find out more information on it, and where they can contact you or find out more about the work that you're doing?
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Neil. The title of the book is Transformation in Times of Crisis. It's available on online channels, Amazon UK, Amazon US, and many other parts of the world. We also have a website, transformationintimesofcrisis.com, and you can get all the details, information, the webcasts, the book launch event that we did with Phil Kotler, and also available on there as well. So happy reading, and really thank you for listening.
Well, a huge thank you to both of you for coming on the podcast today. It's a great book. I do implore anyone interested in technology and how it can transform their business to take a look. But more than anything, a big thank you to both of you for coming on and sharing that story with me today.
And thank you, Neil, for having us.
Thank you.
If anyone gets a chance to read the book, Transformation in Times of Crisis, or has already read it, and just found this podcast, I want to learn more about how you applied the 8 principles and analytical framework to your own situation. Like I said at the beginning of this podcast, a book such as this is no good just buying it, having a flick through and leaving it on a shelf. That's no good to anyone. But following those 8 principles and making a difference, or even tweaking them along your journey slightly, and then sharing that information with others so they can learn from your experiences, so they don't have to make the same mistakes that you did. That is why I record this podcast every day, and that is why at the end of every episode I urge you all to email or contact me through a variety of online methods. So today I thank the authors for joining me on the podcast, but remember, there is a seat here for you too. If you've read the book, if you haven't read the book, if you've got any experiences or insights you'd like to share, I want to hear them, whether it be just reading out a message on here, or if you're brave enough to come on the podcast and have a chat with me. Whatever it is, email me now, techblogwriter@outlook.com, tweet me at Neil C. Hughes, or pop by my website, techblogwriter.co.uk, and we'll take things from there. If not, don't worry, I'll return again tomorrow with another story, another tech company. And hopefully, day by day, we can make this world a little bit better, one day at a time. So, a big thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.